Good evening and welcome to the February 28th, 2019 City Council meeting. We know that many of you are here tonight here to speak about the officer-involved shooting and the investigation into the death of Antonio Arce. There'll be an update on the status of this investigation in a few moments. We also understand that there are representatives from several different independent organizations here this evening, and there will be an opportunity to hear each and every one of you at the end of this meeting. I will treat everyone fairly and call the cards in the order in which they have been received. If you would like to speak on an item on this agenda or an unscheduled public appearances, please fill out a comment card, which can be found in the back of the council chambers, and please turn it over to our security in the back of the room, and they'll bring it to the security, and we'll give it to our city clerk. There are also residents here this evening with business on tonight's agenda. We have to consider their business, but I will move quickly through this agenda as we can so that you all can have your chance to speak to us this evening. Guidelines for the conduct of the city council meetings are available at the back of the council chambers, and continued disruptive behavior will lead to removal of the council chambers. We need to be able to hear everyone in this room respectfully. Behavior that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of any council meeting is not helpful and is also not permitted. So let's go through the first couple of items, and we'll hear an update. If everyone's able to be willing to stand and join us with a moment of silence. Thank you. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have our council meeting minutes. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to approve meeting minutes A1 through 4.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Navarro and seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to accept board and committee meeting minutes B1 through 18. 21, I apologize.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilman Navarro, seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those disapprove, oppose, that motion carries. Next, we have some reports and announcements, and I'd like to call on our city manager, Andrew Ching.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to say a few words tonight. Based on the size of tonight's audience and the events at the last regular council meeting on January 31st, we anticipate that there will be numerous comments during unscheduled public appearances later in the meeting regarding the officer-involved shooting investigation into the death of Antonio Arce. I know, Mayor, that you plan to work through the council's business tonight on the agenda as rapidly as possible in order to hear that input at the scheduled time at the end of the agenda. First, to the family of Antonio, and on behalf of the city of Tempe, I want to express my sincere sympathies for the tragic loss of your beloved son, brother, and family member. As a parent myself, I can only begin to understand a small fraction of the pain that you are experiencing and the depth of your grief. Second, there have been requests for updates about the status of the criminal and administrative investigations concerning the officer-involved shooting. I'm here to provide that brief update tonight during my announcements. As was announced last week, the criminal investigation has concluded and has been submitted to the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for their review. The county attorney has the authority to determine whether any criminal charges will be brought. We await their decision and do not have a timeline for when that might come. At the same time, the administrative investigation is ongoing and will not be concluded until at least after the county attorney's office has concluded its review. In the meantime, we have created a page on the tempe.gov website containing details about the various stages in the investigation of an officer-involved shooting. That web page, as you can see on the monitors, is tempe.gov/police, and you click on Investigations Process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all that I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Ching. As I stated and said in the past, I know that the family of Antonio Arce is grieving his death. As a father, I join them in their grief and their shock at the sudden loss of their son. I have such compassion for this family, and I'm respectful of their needs as they have mourned their son's death. On behalf of the council and I am offering our condolences to the Arce family. I do want to be clear on one thing. As a mayor and as a council, we cannot legally intervene into any active investigations or decide when or if evidence becomes publicly available. The full investigation will become public once the county attorney announces his decision. I assure you, there will be ample time at the end of this meeting to speak, just as we did at the last council meeting. You will hear each and every one of you for your allotted time. Our objective is to hear your concerns and everything you have to say. Our next item is our consent agenda. All the items listed on the consent agenda will be considered as a group and will be enacted with one motion by the City Council unless an item is removed for separate consideration. Members of the public may remove a public hearing item for separate consideration. Public hearing items are designated with an asterisk, and council members may remove any item for separate consideration. If you do wish to speak on a public hearing item, please fill out a speaker's card, which can be found at the back of the room. And when it's your turn to speak, I will call your name. Miscellaneous items, 5A1 through 5A12. Awards and bids and contracts, items 5B1 through 5B14. And resolutions, items 5C1 to 5C14. Any agenda item that is marked with an asterisk is a public hearing item, and it can be removed by a member of the public for separate consideration. If anyone would like to have a public hearing item removed, could you please get my attention now? Councilman Granville.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to remove item 5A12 as I have potential conflict of interest.
Okay. Item 5A12 has been removed. Anything else? Anyone else? Seeing none, I look for a motion with the consent agenda as read, with the exception of 5A12. It's been moved by Councilmember Adams and seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Please vote. That motion passes 7-0. Next is items 5A12 is approved to authorize to waive the attorney-client privilege solely on the limited purpose of releasing an investigative report dated December 4, 2018, authorized by legal counsel Sarah L. Barnes for the release in the transcripts of the interview conducted by Sarah L. Barnes with Councilmember Corey Granville, dated January 24, 2019, for Councilmember Granville's responses to the investigative report dated December 27, 2018, and for the reply to Mr. Granville's responses to the investigative report dated February 15, 2019. Is there any comments or a motion on item 5A12? Councilmember Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to make an amendment to this item. I would like to add a fifth document to the four that are listed here. That document being the unredacted Phoenix Police Report that's in the City of Tempe's possession. The only redaction of that report that I think we should see is the alleged victims' names and Councilmember Granville's employer, if it is listed.
Okay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor, members of council. We have obligations under Arizona law that we would need to abide by in completing our redactions and releasing that if that was the council's direction. That may include more redactions than simply the victims' names and the employer, if that employer is even included in that report.
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you. Could you?
There's rules.
There's rules.
Okay. All right.
Have a discussion.
Don't break the law. So, all right.
All right, so there is a motion to add a fifth document with certain redactions as stated per our city attorney that is applicable. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Councilmember Arredondo Savage. Please vote. That motion passes 6-0 with Councilmember Granville abstaining. The next item where am I going here? Page 9. Next item is our non-consent agenda. All the items listed on the non-consent agenda will be considered separately. Agenda items scheduled for introduction and first hearing will be heard, but will not be voted upon at this meeting. Agenda items scheduled for a second public hearing and final adoption will be voted upon tonight. Item 6A1 is to hold a public hearing on the biannual audit of the development fees for water, wastewater, police, fire, street, parks, and recreation facilities for the period of July 1st, 2016 through June 30th, 2018. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us? Could you please get our attention? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Any comments? I don't have anybody in there. Any comments or discussions from the council on item 6A1? Seeing none, move on to the next item. Item 6A2 is to hold a public hearing for an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision to approve a use permit standard to reduce the south side building setback from 10 feet to 8 feet, and to a use permit to allow a second story for the Skinner residence located at 919 South Maple Avenue. The applicant is Karen Gillis on behalf of the Maple Ash Neighborhood Association. This is a public hearing item. I do have two cards. I have a couple more cards. Pam Hagler, please come forward. State your name and place of residence for the record. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Pam Hagler, and I'm a resident of the city of Tempe. As a previous renter, a previous homeowner, and hopefully a once again homeowner in the city of Tempe, I have some concerns about what is happening in the Maple Ash neighborhood. My husband and I have been watching this neighborhood, hoping for a suitable property to become available that we might purchase and live in. We think it is encouraging that the people of the neighborhood value their neighborhood enough to protect it. That is a good thing. It is even a good thing that that protection extends to coming to agreement with the city of Tempe to enact rules that make Maple Ash what it is today. What concerns us is that an owner-occupant could do their due diligence, learn what the rules are, follow those rules, and then have a small contingent from the neighborhood influence the city to change the rules mid-process. And that is exactly what seems to have happened with 919 South Maple Avenue. So as a concerned Tempe resident and future homeowner, I just have a few questions for the council to consider. First, what are the rules agreed upon by the city and the Maple Ash Neighborhood Association that pertain to the property at 919 South Maple Avenue? 2, have the new property owners followed those rules in good faith? And 3, if the rules need modification, is it right to do so this far into the process? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, this agenda item is designated as a quasi-judicial item. The city council sits as a quasi-judicial body when hearing appeals. In this situation, the city council must conduct itself as a court, not as a legislative body. And obviously, pre-meeting contact with the city council on quasi-judicial matters is prohibited, and any materials or conversations concerning the item shall be presented to the city council at the scheduled public meeting. Per the zoning and development code, an appeal shall be limited to the issues raised in the petition of the zoning and development code, section 6-803, and information not included in the petition is not to be considered. So tonight's public hearing is an appeal of the Development Review Commission's decision on January 8th, 2019, a use permit standard to reduce the south side building setback from 10 feet to 8 feet, and a use permit to allow a second story for the Skinner residence located at 919 South Maple Avenue. If I can ask Ms. Karen Gitlis, who is the appellant, to come make her presentation. Karen here? I thought I saw you earlier.
I do have some items I would like to put on the plate, and if that's okay during my presentation. Thank you for hearing my neighborhood. I have a lot to tell you. I think there is a lot of information you need to understand that supports these arguments. I am asking you to uphold city regulations and processes, exactly what the last speaker mentioned here. I feel that this has not been the case in this case. Much egregious development behavior exists in Maple Ash. We desperately need the city to follow its own rules and not give away benefits to bad players. Stick to the underlying zoning in Maple Ash. And that's something that has not been followed. We've given away all kinds of things. After begging the city for help for the past 33 years, we still have very little to assist us when it comes to unscrupulous development practices and uneven application of rules. For example, suggesting that a developer host a neighborhood meeting to a recalcitrant developer who has his or her own plans set in stone does little to foster productive conversation and expression of disagreement. Maple Ash Neighborhood Association. You need to understand what our neighborhood association is. The church, I believe, needs to understand what our neighborhood association is. More about who we are. The Maple Ash Neighborhood Association, known informally as MANA, it was founded in 1986 under city auspices. The newly created Neighborhood Services Office to assist neighbors in forming and running neighborhood associations and block watches. Unlike an HOA, an NA, or neighborhood association, is a voluntary group that may not charge dues if it wants to participate in the city programs and is open to all who own or reside in the neighborhood. As such, those who attend monthly MANA meetings elect officers annually, write bylaws, and engage in activities that may be social, community-oriented, such as a railroad cleanup day, charitable, educational, etc. The group also discusses perceived problems and votes on the methods for addressing these. I was enjoined to mount a protest by the 20 or 22 people at our December 2nd, 2018 meeting in which the Skinner Project and the applicant's disappointing neighborhood meeting were discussed. The group agreed, based on reports of attendees, that there were more questions than answers about the project, that the applicants were unknowledgeable about city process to the extreme, and their agent also was unknowledgeable, and that the applicants had been evasive about answering questions. They appeared untruthful, as if they were hiding something, and they were. The fact that they had any connection to the church on Mill. They evaded questions about their affiliation with their institution and their intent to use the house as a multifamily housing, which included building a separately accessed casita. No, they repeated again and again, the house would only be used for their family of 4. Tad Skinner entreated that we trust him as an honest man. This is a home of up to 5,000 square feet, counting the garage, 6 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, and 5 1/4 baths. The casita would be a separate unit. Neighborhood composition and support for historic preservation. These 2 pages of names and I have copies for council members and for staff. Please get past to council. Okay. These 2 pages of names are signatories to the appeal. There are 34 names here signing onto this appeal. We represent ownership of 20 properties. Long-term renters are not represented on this list. They are an important part of our neighborhood association and our constituency, as well as an important part of your constituency. I need to address the negativity that has been directed at our neighborhood association during and constantly before this project came up. The group has a champion in Steve Cephos. For example, There are only a couple of people in the neighborhood who have kept the neighborhood from being a great place to live by putting houses above people. This quote is from a letter by Steve Cephos for this hearing, in fact. And guess what? At this point, I would ask all those in council chambers to stand up if you are in favor of the city council taking responsibility and an active role in the preservation of the Maple Ash neighborhood. No demonstrations, please. Hush. As you can see,
But they're
we are
outside.
not alone. Thank you. You may be seated. And guess what, Steve? Mr. Cephos, this appeal action is brought by more than two women. It's brought by us two, Jenny and I, but also three pluralities in the neighborhood. Let me describe that to you. Starting in 1986, and you know what? I've got facts. I've got data because I've kept records and I crunched the data, and so I have numbers. So in 1986, when first measured by the city, residents split into thirds in Maple Ash. One, the preservationists who want to preserve and enhance the residential and historical characteristic of the neighborhood and value the quality of life they have found together in this community. Two, Mr. Cephos's group, Maple, development and proponents and owners of property in the neighborhood who in general do not live among us, that want to develop the neighborhood to its fullest and highest financial extent possible. They value the dollar over the community that doesn't, and they don't live here to know what the community is about. And three, the transient renters and apathetic owners from whom we get no response. About zoning, it must be nice to write whatever information you have at hand to characterize the neighborhood. Again, directed at Mr. Cephos, and I have a map of zoning. Oops, not that. How do I work this? Oh, this one is for the staff. Does that work? Okay. This map is from the city zoning and development manual that used to actually be printed in hard copy. Remember that, guys? And I have used it for many years. The R3 zoning in the neighborhood is not the predominant category as Mr. Cephos asserted. The R3 zoning on the map is represented by yellow and blue. The R2 zoning on the map is represented by orange. Orange is the predominant color looking at the map, but that isn't really readily apparent in making a comparison. It's close. So I counted the properties in each classification using this map, and R2 wins as the predominant zoning classification for properties in Maple Ash. I counted using the map, and there are 83 R3 properties and 90 R2 properties. I wouldn't go as far as your written declaration that, quote, R2 is inconsistent with the mostly R3 zoned Maple Ash neighborhood. This is an incorrect statement. You shouldn't change facts to make your argument, Mr. Cephos. Maple Ash is 50 acres and includes 3 originally platted areas: the 1909 Gage Addition from University to 10th Street, 1924 Park Tract from 10th to 13th Street, and College View south of 13th Street, platted in 1945. There are 192 properties in my count in the neighborhood. There were 195 properties in the neighborhood based on the staff report prepared in August 2006 for consideration of the designation of the Maple Ash neighborhood as an historic district. This attempt failed. Maple Ash is not a historic district. But I'd like to show you what the uses in the neighborhood are from an analysis I did for this meeting.
Karen, we have one quick question from Vice Mayor Kuby.
Can you identify on the map where the Skinner property is?
Oh, great.
I think I know where it is, but I
Sure.
want to make.
Okay, the two properties that, oh, sorry. 9. Okay, 928 is owned by the Skinners across the street for the last 3 years. And 919 is right here.
That's
Both
the property
properties are engaged addition, 928 and 919. Both are properties owned by the Skinners that we believe are being used for inappropriate church purposes. Just inappropriate purposes. This gets to the boarding house question. And here is, I also did not give you a copy. I wanted you to be able to follow along in this presentation. And so I will pass you these copies. This is what I'm reading from, and it looks pretty rough. It is. And isn't it?
Thank you.
Okay, back to uses. Commercial, there are 22. We have one big business plex in the neighborhood and some smaller business plexes and some large businesses like a bank and a CVS. But there are 22 actual properties that are related to business. Religious is 19 of the 192. Remember the 192 properties altogether. Multifamily attached, these are the new units that are cropping up throughout the neighborhood for the past decade, 2 decades or so. There are 19 of those. There's 6 vacant lots, and there's 1 parking lot owned by the Church on Mill, rented to students and subsumed under their 13 properties at the south end of the neighborhood, so they're not added to the count here. But this is a nuisance parking lot that causes a lot of jaywalking by students on 13th Street. And that passed many years ago. It's been there for years. The single-family lots are 126 out of 192. And I would like to point out, again, to the issue of how many people there are in support of this, that there are approximately 60 properties whose owners are in favor of maintaining the character of Maple Ash. This number is actually based on previous surveys. I didn't have time to collect everybody's signature for this meeting, but we've had 2 previous surveys done. One was in pursuit of historic preservation designation, and the second was to obtain signatures to protest the details and design of the overbuilt Resurrection Complex at 959 South Ash. Of the 126 family properties left in the slowly diminishing historic neighborhood, up to 55 to 60 owners favor preservation that we know of. Calculated this way, the number of preservation-minded people is 40 to 50%. A lot of, I don't mention this, I meant to, but a lot of the neighborhood, it's about 50 or 60% maybe, I'm guessing. We don't have an actual figure, but it's rental. Some of these 60 owners have moved away. I was surprised to find over the past 10 years, it's a wash, basically. They have been replaced by other preservation-oriented homeowners who are wonderful stewards of their properties. We have lost 1 historic home or 2, but there are occasions that in new owners come in and rehab an existing house to Arcadia standard. Jason and Christy, thank you. Or build a new home that fits the context of the neighborhood. Thank you, Mary and Ken. And always, there are plenty of trees planted and landscape installed. These owners are committed to the neighborhood and its mission and vision. Make no mistake, this home will have multifamily and institutional uses. I'm back to 919 and 928. Neighbors have been misled on this project since last August. I was not present to engage with the owners. In addition, believing this would be a single-family home on a small property, I knew the neighborhood would have no input. This is based on the city process for single-family approval. Neither design nor demolition are up for discussion. These people never had a clue about city process, and as Chair Lyon pointed out, the reason to hire a professional is that he or she has an understanding of and experience with the process and can buffer the client and the client's missteps. I believe that the applicants in this case were deliberately knaves about the process, just as they deliberately withheld information from neighbors at the neighborhood meeting. Through a process of refusal, insistence, manipulation, and bullying, they obtained their goal of what they are calling a single-family home. Let's unpack that for a moment. The couple insisted at the outset of the process last summer that the house would only be a single-family home for 4. They continued to insist throughout the process and refused to grasp that a project needs to be vetted not based solely on the zoning, but also on its intended use. A single-family home use does not have separately accessed accommodations for others. Single-family homes do not have standing weekly meetings for large groups of people with individual cars. Single-family homes do not have a revolving door for friends, missionaries, guests of all sorts as a routine occurrence. We all, of course, have some of that, hopefully more than less, but their intended use has always been, this is my assertion, that they want an annex to their institution on 13th and Mill where the owner works, and they have a good start on that with 928. More on that later. Moreover, staff only ever heard the applicant's assertion and descriptions of intended use. They never saw paper. They had no reason to believe it wasn't a single-family unit until they saw the plan for the first time 5 months later. Initial submittal of the plan on paper came on December 12. Staff realized the plan was for a multifamily project and attempted to help the applicants get to a version that could be approved as a single-family home using their drawings for the multifamily project. There was never a consensus by the DRC that this was in fact a single-family home. If you watched the DRC meeting on Channel 11 or read my brief, including selected excerpts of that, you are aware of this. During that process, they resisted following staff suggestions to make this into a single-family home. The one condition they requested they not be held to, and Chad Weaver approved of this by giving them a waiver, was that they remove or reorient the staircase leading to the second-story casita. With that staircase still there, it doesn't matter that they changed a door out to a window. It can easily be changed back. They have all the construction in place for it. Without following through with such a condition, this house is simply a poorly designed single-family house that can be easily converted. If you believe this house should be approved as single-family, please ensure that it remains so by adding this condition back to the stipulations. With the stairwell in place, it will be easily converted to a separate unit, the initial intention. Alternatively, require that this applicant submit their house for what it is, a multi-family project. That is what several members of the DRC-3 were aiming for in their comments as I unpacked that suitcase. Why do these people get to play by different rules? Boarding house uses. Neighbors have concerns that the single-family home the applicants talk about will actually be used as a boarding house. There is, in fact, a precedence for this in the house the Skinner family owns across the street at 928 South Maple, purchased almost 3 years ago, according to the assessor's website. That apparently has become a boarding house. A young man who works at the Skinner home, the Skinner's home away from home institution, rents from the couple at 928 South Maple. The Skinners allow him to sublet this to other tenants, hence the boarding house claim. You decide. Skinners allow their tenant Eric to sublet to not just one person, but to 5 other people unrelated to them. Eric and his wife have 3 children, making a family of 5, and there are 5 additional surnames on the mailbox. So there are 10 people living in this home. This is blatantly against city code. The house is listed as a 4-plex, but I have only experienced it as a single-family home enlarged. The Spain home, our blacksmith turned to auto mechanic in the city. It was enlarged years ago by an ASU baseball coach for his team's use as a clubhouse. It sits on a 9,675-foot lot. I estimate that this single family home is possibly 7,000 square feet. We expect the oversized home at 919 to be subject to the same egregious uses. The applicants just don't play by the rules. It gives me no pleasure to bring these objections and accusations against the applicants, but I am grateful for this opportunity, very, very grateful to be able to say everything I want to say finally, after 33 years at the podium. I'm grateful for the experience, and we are all fighting for the existence of our historic neighborhood and the encroachment of development and uses that are out of character with the originally platted single-family plats. The City Council can investigate and stop illegitimate uses, those that may be built and those already existing that the Skinners control. Our requests include, and I haven't touched on this, but let me put a statement up on the difference between the variance and the use permit standard. This should not be routinely used. This wicked use permit standard has got in our neighborhoods way more times than I can count. It's used in place of a variance, and I'm wondering whether there is any legal right for the city to do that. I'm asking the city to investigate this. Attorneys investigate this. In a variance, an owner needs to prove that they have hardships in one or more or all of 3 categories in order to get a variance. Why give this away as just handed over the counter by the development department? Second, I posted that. We request that the city attorney review this procedure for lawfulness. Second, send this project back for review as a multi-family development. This was an extended discussion for the DRC commissioners, and there was no agreement on it, but it seemed a pretty logical thing to do. If they want multifamily, let them apply for it. If you decide not to do this, please hold the applicants to the removal of the outside stairwell so that the house cannot be easily converted to multifamily. They will then have the single-family home, albeit poorly designed, with access to a bedroom through another bedroom. And the last item I have is please, please investigate the boarding house uses at 928 South Maple in the hope that if this 919 gets built, we may prevent those kind of uses and meetings that go on every single week with cars and people in the house, disturbing the single family characteristic of the neighborhood. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And I want to, from the bottom of my heart and from all my neighbors and friends and colleagues, extend heartfelt condolences to Antonio's family and friends. Our hearts are breaking for the family.
Thank you, Karen. Councilmember Granville.
Karen, don't go. I just have a quick question for you.
Sure.
So obviously you know that this is zone multifamily. I'm curious if you could just share your thoughts a little bit about your frustration with this project and the way it was handled, but a denser project could go there without a variance or a use permit. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about that, because it would seem like while this isn't everything you were hoping for, it's better than it could have been.
Good question. Thank you, Councilmember Granville. I have never seen every other multifamily project coming into the neighborhood understands what the rules of multifamily development are. They have a trained architect drawing up a plan, which this project does not have, and they know and they have experience submitting these documents to the city of Tempe. They can be contentious, but the city approves them all the time. And the process is never a question. I have never seen a process that has been this horrible, and it's because these people are trying to build, and I believe they sincerely thought they had a single-family house. And part of their error was not understanding that they don't have that right based on the fact that it is multifamily R3 zoning. They have that right to do that project under the appropriate process. They didn't choose to do that, and they refused to listen to the fact that, yeah, you might be needing to do certain things. We all realized very quickly on December 12th that this was multifamily and church uses. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, can we have the property owners, Tad and Katina Skinner? Can you make a presentation for us?
Yeah, PowerPoint. You have the clicker. Honorable Mayor and City Council members, my name is Tad Skinner, and this is my wife, Katina. And it's not our desire to be here tonight. It's not our desire to be forced to contradict and correct others, like we're going to have to do tonight. It's not our desire to be adversarial in any way. There's much more important things for us to be doing, and we think for you to be doing as well. But for the small appeal fee of $125, that's all it takes, is to file an appeal that leads us here tonight. I can't tell you how disheartening it is as a human being to be harassed like we've been through this building process. So there's no joy on this side of the podium from us tonight as we talk about these things. There's a clear pattern and a past history of false information being spread about developments in the neighborhood when MANA isn't able to control them. We just heard from Ms. Gitlis how she's upset with city processes and codes. Far more about Steve Cephos and other things related to the city than it is about our project itself. And these are codes that we followed to the letter. We've experienced falsehoods being shared both tonight already, and I'm sure we'll hear some more in the public comments in a few minutes, and falsehoods being spread around the neighborhood. Ms. Gitlis mentioned the Ash Resurrection. If you'll recall, that was a similar appeal that came to the City Council back in 2012, that the City Council rejected that appeal that MANA filed. And that Ash Resurrection was an attempt to build several residences by one builder. And in a letter to this City Council by the owner, Irene McMurray, she said, quote, Ms. Gitlis circulated inaccurate and misleading information in opposition to this project, end quote. And about that project, Ms. Gitlis complained of so-called, and again to use her words, big money coming into the neighborhood from outside groups. So please understand that's not us. We're not big developers. We don't have big money, yet we're still treated in the same manner. Katina and I have been residents of Tempe for over 15 years, and I've worked in the Maple Ash neighborhood for about 20 years. We're graduate degree holders from ASU, and we've been involved in the community for over 20 years. Because we've had such good experiences in Maple Ash and the surrounding area, our desire for the past several years has been to buy a home in that neighborhood. And having looked and not found a home suitable to our family and lifestyle needs, we finally found a property that we believe is suitable to build on, and we made that purchase in late August of 2018. And houses and buildings are not unimportant to us. Many serve their purpose for the time, and the city codes that are in place today agree with our perspective on these buildings. There are some wonderful homes that ought to be preserved in this neighborhood. And there are some homes that have not been properly cared for that have simply outlived their design structural integrity. And that perfectly describes the home that we purchased at 919 South Maple. We followed all codes, procedures, processes that the city gave us as we demolished the unsound structures that were previously at that property. And there's more that we could say about how we made the decision to demolish. And though that doesn't really have anything to do with the DRC's decision that's being appealed, we're happy to answer any questions. Ms. Gitlis mentioned the neighborhood meeting earlier, and though we've been told by Mr. Weaver and Mr. LeVague from the City Planning Department that that meeting isn't required by the city, we still followed all procedures in meeting with the neighbors. And we could defend ourselves against every allegation, and we will if the City Council asks us to, but we believe that has nothing to do with the DRC's decision. Further, we believe it would just be a waste of everybody's time to go into all those details. But instead, please know that while we expect to get to know our neighbors and share life with them, there are a few of the appellants who expect much, much more of anyone who would dare to build in a neighborhood. We've been accused of deception and evil motives because we haven't disclosed every single aspect of our lives. Who expects that from their neighbor? It seems to us that MANA's requirements are excessive by anyone's standards, and that we're expected to capitulate to their demands so that maybe, possibly, maybe we might be able to be approved by them. And that's simply wrong. That level of scrutiny and control is not justified, nor is it called for in any city code or process. We're just a family. We're not big city developers. We've got kids who will be going to college soon. We're involved in this community already. We want the opportunity for our kids as they go to college to stay close to us, but yet have the opportunity to have some privacy and freedom. And this house is designed for that purpose. We also want to allow missionaries and friends from our church to stay with us for short periods of time. And how is that any different from any other single family homes experience? We're social people, and we happen to think that that's a very good thing for neighborhoods. So our desire is to integrate further into neighborhood and not change the look of the neighborhood. Ms. Gitlis claimed actually twice that we would be inappropriately using our property for church purposes. Inappropriate church purposes, using a property. Those were her words. And that's simply not true. It sounds an awful lot like she's asking you to deny these use permits because she doesn't want to allow us to exercise our freedom of religious expression. Is this really what such a discussion has come to? Surely the City Council, indeed any governmental institution in this country, doesn't want to find themselves deciding whether or not someone should be allowed to have people from church over for dinner, nor deciding whether or not someone is allowed to design their house so that the little kids can go to a different room to play after dinner, so the moms and dads of young kids can enjoy dessert and discussion without the children, nor deciding whether we can have missionaries stay with us for a short time. I don't feel like we should have to defend that for our single-family use home. There's no nefarious intention for the use of this single-family home. We've spoken with several in the neighborhood over the past decade plus who've told us that they want more owner-occupied homes in the neighborhood and that they certainly don't want big condos and townhomes. And Karen Gitlis and others have fought vigorously over the years against big new developments, most recently, to our knowledge, in 2012. So we're doing exactly what's been requested. We're building a single-family home in a multi-family neighborhood, and we're finding that it doesn't matter that we're doing what's been requested for years. Some people are still angry about it. And we're actually sickened that our desire to build a home for our family in a neighborhood that we love is being turned into some sort of political controversy. So, Mr. Mayor and City Council members, imagine that you want to build a home for your family in the community that you love. You've abided by every single city code and process. And there are well more city codes and processes in this neighborhood than there are in any other neighborhood in Tempe. So you've abided by every city code and process, and then imagine that you wake up in a zoning controversy that you don't want any part of and you can barely understand. These use permits are granted often, and the paid professionals and experts of the city staff have recommended approval. The DRC has recommended approval. The neighbor to the south, who is most affected by these use permits, is in complete agreement with our design. We wanted to be welcome to this neighborhood like anyone else would, but instead we found a neighbor on our property who wouldn't leave when we asked her to. We read of people on Facebook spreading falsehoods and campaigning against us personally. Yesterday afternoon, Ms. Gitlis was on the front porch of our rental home on Maple, 2 feet from the front door, taking pictures. Why on earth would she do that? That's harassment. We were threatened by the main signer, Ms. Gitlis, to the appeal that they'd fight us to the bitter end on building a house on our private property. Another appeal signer wouldn't leave our property when demolition of the previous structures was underway. And the appellants paid $125 to stop the building process. Yet it costs us thousands of dollars and months of time to be here tonight. It's a shame that it's proven to be so difficult for a family to build a home in this neighborhood. And further, our experiences with these two members of the Maple Ash Neighborhood Association shows that if the City Council chooses to grant this appeal and thereby force us to redesign the home, we have absolutely no faith that as we redesign that's going to go any more smoothly or be any more pleasant than it's already been to this point. We've already designed and received approval for something allowable within the city codes and process. And if forced to redesign, we believe Ms. Gitlis will follow through on her threat to fight us tooth and nail. And thus we know that no matter what we would be forced to redesign in the future, it will be opposed. And we would end up back here for another appeal in a few months. City Council members, please end this by denying the appeal and allowing our family to build our home. Having said that, a few pictures and facts about the house that we've designed might be helpful. You can see this is an artist rendering from Mill looking at the house, or from Maple looking at the house. You can see that the house fits in very well in the neighborhood. And though the neighborhood is very eclectic, there's a lot of older homes in the neighborhood, there's many newer homes as well. We wanted to design a home that fit in with the buildings, the other homes around it, and we think we've done that. It actually looks a little bit like the home that was previously there. So the new design, the new house is significantly bigger than the one it replaced. You can see that the house is not over-designed for the property. The lot coverage is not much more than the previous design, 39% for the new design, 33% for the previous design, and it's well below what the city allows for that lot. Though it's zoned for up to 3 stories, we chose not to do that because it wouldn't fit into the neighborhood to have a 3-story house. So rather at higher cost, we chose to build a basement. We've already been granted permission to have a use permit for a 2nd story on a single-family resident and a use permit standard to reduce the south side building setback from 10 feet to 8 feet. The paid professionals in the city's planning department are in approval for these use permits, as are the DRC, as they approved it. And also of particular importance, the neighbor to the south, who's going to be most affected by this, is in complete agreement with the design. Regarding these 2 use permits, the 2-story structures, you can see that if we look at Maple and Ash from University to the north to 13th Street to the south, 30% of those properties have a 2-story structure. And there are 3 two-story homes directly across from 919 South Maple and 1 that is just 2 doors down. City code allows a 10-foot setback from the property line, and we've asked for and been granted the ability to build only 2 feet into that 10-foot setback. And if this house is an anomaly or an aberration in the neighborhood, it's because it's only has 1 setback or one reduction in setback on 1 side rather than multiple. You can see that over a third of the properties on Maple and Ash have 1 structure that extends into at least 1 setback. Nearly half the properties on Maple have that. And one of the pre-existing structures on 919 South Maple was actually built on the property line itself. Regarding the appeal, these are the signed appellants, the people that signed the application for the appeal. Nearly 1/3 of those that signed live in properties with 2-story structures. So they are trying to deny us something that they already enjoy themselves. Regarding the setback encroachment, over 3/4 of the signed appellants have a structure on their property that's built into at least 1 setback, and a few of these are built on the property line. A few of them are built into multiple setbacks. So again, they're trying to deny us something that they themselves already enjoy. So just as a summary, approximately 30% on Maple and Ash have a 2-story structure. Nearly 1/3 of the signed appellants live on properties with 2-story structures, so about the same, but it's actually quite a bit different with a setback. Over a third on Maple and Ash have at least 1 structure that extends into at least 1 setback, and over 3/4 of the signed appellants have structures that are built into the setback, many into multiple setbacks. One other item that may prove helpful to you. From the beginning of our interactions with the city staff in August of 2018, when city staff first saw our plans, they first saw our drawings back in August, September of 2018, there were no questions regarding whether the house is single family for the first 4+ months. When a question did arise in late December, 2 weeks before the DRC meeting, we worked to meet the conditions of approval to make sure the home is single family.
Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio!
If I can ask you to wait so you have your time to speak.
Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio!
Ask you again, if you could please, sir.
Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio! Justice for Antonio!
No, please wait.
Justice for Antonio!
You guys will have your chance to speak after this. We're trying to get through this. The quicker we can get through this, the quicker you can speak. Thank you. Sir in the hat, I'm going to ask you to sit down so we can sit down. Sir in the hat standing there. I'm going to ask you, this is your first warning. You guys will have a chance to speak after they get. The quicker we get through this, the more you can speak. The quicker we get through this, the quicker you guys can have a chance to speak. Please.
I was saying,
thank you.
We met all the conditions to make the home single family. Every one of the appellants lives in a home labeled single family by the county assessor. But about a third of the appellants, including the main signing appellant, live on properties with multiple separate living structures. Again, we don't want to be here. We don't want to be talking about this. we don't want to be adversaries with our neighbors, but we feel like we need to defend ourselves. So this next slide shows Ms. Gitlis's home. It's an overhead picture of her home. You can see that it's labeled single family by the Maricopa County Assessor's Office. The property lines are in red. And you can see that there are 3 structures, her main house and then 2 other homes that are rentals. And yet it's labeled single family. Again, trying to deny us what she herself has. Now, that's not an accusation, it's not personal, rather it's just a statement about what Maple Ash is like. This is what Maple Ash is. And this is what the definition that the city uses of what
Excuse me one second. Ma'am, or sir, in the red shirt, please stop banging it so we can get this through. Thank you. Go ahead. The quicker we get through this, the quicker you guys can have a chance to speak.
So this is the definition of what the city uses for defining what a single-family home is. So there's more that we could say, and perhaps we will in response to the public comments portion, but again, we're a normal family trying to build a single-family home. City staff gave us a track to run on. We didn't go into ditch on either side. We ran the track. We followed all of the procedures and codes, and we haven't done anything improper. One final thing we want to reiterate, there's a pattern that other individuals who are seeking to improve the neighborhood have experienced, and that's false and inaccurate information is spread about the project. And that kind of stuff is terrible. It's horrible for a neighborhood. It's unhelpful in building a sense of community that the appellants say they desire to create. To this point, we've chosen not to address those accusations, but of course we will if there are questions asked. We have nothing to hide, but our sincere hope is that we don't hear more falsehoods tonight, and that we'll stick to discussing the use permits that have been granted by the DRC with the full approval of the city staff. Questions?
I have a question. This is for Chad. Can you tell me what was done to ensure that the Skinners brought forward a single-family use that they're saying? I mean, what was done for them to ensure that?
Staff's report to DRC indicated some changes that would be necessary to do that, and the DRC approved the project conditional upon those changes, and they have made those changes at this point.
Can you please repeat that?
Yes, the staff conditioned the recommendation of approval at the DRC level on making the changes that would make it solidly a single-family home, which was moving a stairwell and removing a door. DRC approved contingent upon those conditions, and the applicant has since met those conditions.
So they removed the stairwell?
They moved the stairwell and removed the door, yes.
What's that? Removed the stairwell. Removed. Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Kuby?
So, Mr. Skinner, I just have a question about why didn't you apply for a review as a multifamily development? That's what I'm scratching my head. Why didn't you apply for multifamily development? Since you obviously intended it to be multifamily given the staircase, the outside egress to the second floor.
Well, originally the staircase has always been designed to be accessed from the main home. So it was never designed, I think Ms. Gitlis said it was outside the home or something like that. It's always been in the main home and always accessible from the main home. But city staff asked us to make it more accessible to the main home, to arrange it to an open area of the main home rather than just into one room.
But why? But answering my question, why did you not apply as a multifamily development?
I think I understand your question. It was never viewed by us or by staff as anything other than a single-family home. Eventually, in the process, they said, by the way, this looks like we need to change this if it's going to meet the conditions. We never were ever told to go multifamily. And I think that if you look at the houses in the neighborhood, you see why. Because these houses have multiple properties, mostly with renters, I think.
Right, I see. But the red sign that was posted did not say it had a second story, but at the public meeting you did talk about it. But if you're trying to inform the neighborhood about the development, you don't put accurate information that it'll be a second story, then maybe less people would come to the meeting. You see how it kind of builds a circular error loop.
We showed pictures at the meeting of the second story that was discussed.
At the meeting, but at the sign that was posted about the meeting and about
to answer that, Mr.
the red
Rohr,
sign?
about the sign.
Chad?
The meeting was held prior to a formal submittal on our behalf, and we became specifically aware of the second story at that point. The signage, however, because it's not a code-required meeting, but a policy meeting, it's not necessarily an issue. It's not ideal, of course. We made sure that the information was out there, and certainly before our formal review and before DRC, and at DRC, everyone, including the neighbors, was aware of the second story. So there's a timing of information at work.
We put everything on the sign that the city asked us to put. So.
Except they didn't.
Councilmember Adams?
So the city asked you, you put everything on the sign that the city asked you to, but you told the city that you were applying for a single-family house, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If I could ask our city attorney, could you list through the qualifications? We have 5 criteria how we can approve or disapprove. No, I'm going to get that information. Then I'm going to go to a public comments. Ms. Baumann?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council.
Judy, you have to speak up, please.
Yeah, I'll do my best to speak up. So the use permit that is outlined in our zoning and development code outlines the criteria for the city council to consider. The zoning and development code outlines the approval criteria for a use permit. It is granted only upon a finding by the decision-making body that the use covered by the permit, the manner of its conduct, and any building involved will not be detrimental to persons residing or working in the vicinity, to adjacent property, to the neighborhood, or to the public welfare in general, and that the use will be in full conformity to any conditions, requirements, or standards prescribed by the code. The factors to be considered are any significant increase in vehicular or pedestrian traffic, nuisance arising from the emission of odor, dust, gas, noise, vibration, smoke, heat, or glare at a level exceeding that of ambient conditions, contribution to the deterioration of the neighborhood or to the downgrading of property values, which is in conflict with the goals, objectives, or policies for rehabilitation, redevelopment, or conservation as set forth in the city's adopted plan or general plan, compatibility with existing surrounding structures and uses, and adequate control of disruptive behavior, both inside and outside the premises, which may create a nuisance to the surrounding area or general public.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to have to go to public comment right now because we have cards that are speaking on this issue. Mr. Randy Hagler, could you please come forward, state your name and place of residence for the record? Randy stepped out? Okay. Darlene Justice?
My name is Darlene Justice, and I live in Tempe. I hope you guys can hear me. I am concerned with this project. I'm concerned because Maple Ash is our iconic historic neighborhood, and I know that there have been a lot of different things that have gone on that are chiseling away bit by bit on this historic community. And I'm very concerned that this is now being done with use permits, not variances. Variances do have a different process than that. And I want you to know that before the chanting started now, you remember when Karen was speaking and people said Maple Ash, Maple Ash. I went to the back like a grandmother. And it turns out there are a lot of Maple Ash people that were not allowed to come in because of the number of people. So I just wanted to tell you that also. I do not think that this applicant was forthcoming on what they wanted to do in this building. It has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with use and number of people that are going to be in the building. Karen Gitlis is not, I've known her for a long time. I've not known her to want to misrepresent things. I think she's dug into a lot of stuff, and she's trying to protect her neighborhood, her community. There's a lot of people in Maple Ash who want to protect Maple Ash. So if we have procedures that weren't followed correctly, I would hope that you would take and deny or approve the appeal. And maybe we need to look at our procedures and why can you switch back and forth from a use permit to a variance or vice versa. We need to do things to make sure this doesn't keep happening. And I thank you very much. And I want to tell you, I love Tempe. I love all you guys for putting up with things that are going on. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Deborah Zajac? All right, ma'am, this is your second warning. If I have to ask you again, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the council chambers. Thank you. Deborah?
I'm a Tempe resident, and I don't live in this neighborhood, but I am concerned about development happening within our city. And I did watch the DRC meeting on video, YouTube. I like YouTube, great thing. Glad they're up there. And I was just really confused about, because it didn't look like a single-family home. So my biggest concern would be the use, that they should have applied for something, that it's a multi-family unit. And also just the idea of how many people would be coming over, that they need to have a
Out that door.
separate area just to deal with the children. I mean, usually you might have some kids. I would be concerned about the use of the property. The design doesn't look that bad. And also when they were saying how they wanted a separate entrance, and they're making the stairway go through a bedroom into another bedroom. And I'm like, what is that all about? It just seems very, very odd. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Steve Mustefos.
Mr. Mayor, member of the council, I'm going to try to make this as quick as I can because I know you have other business to get to. I got dragged into this because I had the audacity to support my neighbor who's trying to build a single-family home. That's why I got dragged through this, and I'm going to try my best to make my remarks as brief as I can. I'm the property owner that's directly affected by this particular variance. I own the 3 houses south of Mr. Skinner and most of the block. 900 block. I wish we were here tonight to make this a pleasant experience for Dr. Skinner and his family and welcome him to the neighborhood, but unfortunately that's not what we are doing. I think the vast majority of the neighborhood would like to welcome Dr. Skinner. He's the kind of person that we would hope would invest in our neighborhood and bring his family along. I wish we were here tonight to talk about the investment he's bringing, and I wish we were here tonight to talk about the actual issues. He's asking for a 2-foot variance. I don't know how that got into the history of Maple Ash and the referendum on historic preservation. I have no idea. I would just ask you as a council tonight just to deal with the issues that are on the table. That's what's most important to most of us, and that is the 2-foot variance. I know that you guys grant variances like this all the time, and I don't think this should have risen to the level that it is tonight. I apologize to you for that because I think there's other things in Tempe to get to. 20 years ago, we had a referendum on historic preservation in the Maple Ash District, and it failed miserably, and it will fail again if it came up for a vote. I would ask you to just put yourself in Dr. Skinner's position tonight and his wife. I think they did a really good job of describing what they've been through, but if you were trying to build a single-family home for your family, and you were harassed and had people up on your porch taking pictures, I think you might feel uncomfortable as well. And you would not feel welcome in a neighborhood that you've lived in, and you're trying very hard to make a better place for everybody. So I would ask you tonight to deal with the issues at hand, know that he has the support of his neighbor. I'm the one that's affected, and I would ask tonight that you deny the appeal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Philip Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm going to keep this brief. I would just like to say I'm the president for Riverside Neighborhood Association, and that we are in support, complete support of this appeal. There are far too many times, and I can point to so many, but I won't, examples of how this kind of just blowing off whatever it is that has been brought to the table and shown to people, what it is that they'd like to do and changed at the last minute. We need to look at, the boarding houses. What is it that we are going to accomplish by having this kind of a development put in place? And, the likelihood that it would become a boarding house or a place where people could have a frat house. This isn't what we want in our neighborhoods. This has affected our neighborhoods vastly and impacted it terribly. And to come to a meeting with a neighborhood association and tell them one thing and then change what they have to say to the council or to the DRC is absolutely inexcusable. There should not be a acceptance of this kind of a plan of action. We need to definitely define what our zoning variances are and make sure that we stand by them in the future. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Eduardo Yates. Eduardo, it's kind of hard to read it. Oh, but she wants me to read it. I can't read it. Basically, if I could read, Eduardo, if I could read your handwriting, it basically says historic architecture should not be violated. See Karen Gitlis. Okay. All right. That's all the cards I have for this item. Is there anyone in the audience? It says should not have. Oh, here he goes. Historic character or historic architecture should not be violated and should have been approved at the DRC. Should have not been approved at the DRC. Skinner misrepresented the use as a single-family home. Okay. And then I do have one more person, Ms. Lucier.
Good evening. My name is Jenny Lucier. I currently reside at 823 South Maple Avenue. Soon I will be residing at 1104 South Ash. I've lived in the neighborhood for about 34 years. I've invested a lot of my blood, sweat, and tears and money into this neighborhood. It's the heart and soul of my life. I own the property to the north of this, where this project is. And yes, I am affected by that because of it. But we're all affected by it. You don't have to live just next door. This is not just about a 2-foot setback. It's about process and about following and reviewing a project based on the appropriate standards. And that's really what this appeal is about. Clearly, I'm in support of that. Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to ask me?
No, that's it. Thank you. That's all the cards I have. Is anyone in the audience that wishes to address item number 6A2? Could you please get my attention? Yes, sir. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Brian Jacobson, resident in Tempe, Arizona for 9 years. I'm completely opposed to the appeal here. I think the Skinner family has gone through everything they need to file for a variance for a single-family home. They have 4 family members, and they're applying for a 6-bedroom house. I had 2 family members when I bought my house in Tempe. It's a 4-bedroom. Excuse me. It seems ridiculous that they can follow all the steps and all the processes to pursue their dream house in their dream neighborhood and to have it shut down. I mean, if that happened to me and my wife, we'd be absolutely devastated. And I mean, we would be broken. We wouldn't know what to do with it. I mean, they have already invested a significant amount of money that they can't recoup on this, following staff advice, following what the city's asked them to do. And the city's been very helpful with that, following the process. And I've watched through all the meetings, I've read through all the notes, and it seems like they're applying for a variance that's approved what seems like dozens of times a year that hardly ever makes it to the council. I feel like the reason it made it to the council is because it's the Maple Ash neighborhood, and whatever they decide they don't like, they will aggressively target. And I feel like that neighborhood is no different than any other neighborhood in Tempe. My neighborhood was founded in '64, and it's got its issues, and it's got a neighborhood association that's not quite as active, but it's equally, important to see that the rules are followed all across Tempe. And there's policy variances for Maple Ash, but to my understanding, there's no difference in the rules of the city. And they followed the rules that are in the city code, and they applied for the variances, and they were approved based on the standard things that have happened across the city of Tempe over the last 50 years. I think that to wipe those variances that were approved by the DRC would be, out of line from a policy standpoint. I think they applied, whether or not it's the right way, they applied for a single-family home, assuming that they were going to treat it like a single-family home. Their son is going to hopefully go to ASU in 2 years, and they would like to provide him the bedroom upstairs so that he doesn't have to go through the main kitchen every single day when he leaves to go to ASU. And I think that's a very good thing to have. He's trying to provide a better life for his kids than he had for himself in the city of Tempe. And I think they deserve that right, and they've followed the process to earn that right. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's all the cards I have for item 6A2. With that, I'll close the public hearing portion of that. I need to call back up Karen Gitlis to respond to some of the public comments that have been made and a summary of your statement.
I really don't have additional comments to make, but I agree completely with Jenny Lucier that this is about city process and how things can go wrong and what are we going to do about it now that we are at this horrible point. I am not happy to be here either, Mr. and Mrs. Skinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments or discussion from the council on this? Vice Mayor Kuby?
Looking at all the criteria for use permit, I think this project should be sent back to the DRC for a multifamily development review. And the approval needs to be based on the appropriate standards. And when you have a multifamily development, there are different parking standards, for example. So we don't know the impact of this house with the bedrooms. Excuse me, I'm speaking. I don't think I can speak right now. The impact of obviously multifamily impact on the street and the vehicular traffic that will result from, as we've heard, the meetings and all the attendees, that will have an impact on the neighborhood, and an impact that's negative to, may not be to Mr. Fessos, but to Ms. Lucer, who lives on the north side of the property. I'm looking at the criteria, and I see the possibility of a significant increase in vehicular traffic due to this property, and no nuisance arriving from the emission of odor. I agree that that's not a problem. But I do see negative impacts on our neighborhoods, and that's why we're here. That's what we're all about, is to preserve our neighborhoods. And I don't know if you did it on purpose and applied it as a single family development, or you got bad advice from your counselors, your architect, but clearly there were some mistakes made. And I think that you should have to go back to the DRC and look at this as a multifamily development and consider the review and the standards that come with multifamily developments. Thank you. So I will be voting in favor of the appeal.
Thank you. I just want to restate what we're here to, what the item is regarding the appeal of the approval of a use permit standard to reduce the south side building setback from 10 to 8 feet. We can only address the items that what's before us, which is to reduce the south side building setback from 10 feet to 8 feet, and a use permit to allow a second story for the Skinner residence located at 919 South Maple Avenue.
Yes, and that one issue, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
About that, we've heard people mention variances. The setback was not evaluated as a variance, which I believe has a stricter requirement. It was evaluated as a use permit standard, so that seemed to be another possible complication here, which makes me wonder if it was the appropriate standard and not a variance.
Chad, can you address that question and concern?
Yes, certainly. When you have a single standard, originally 10 feet, anything less than that is a variance. The city council at some point in history, I don't have the date, chose to change the code to allow the 2-foot reduction with only a use permit standard. So it does not require a variance. What we're looking at is not a variance by code. It is a use permit standard and was approved at the DRC as code requires.
Well, there is we should kind of clarify that in the future, I would think, because, I heard the Mr. Skinner and I think Mr. Fessos talking about a variance, that a variance was granted. So somehow they have confused the terms too. Pardon? And, but I'm looking at the approval criteria for the use permit, and I'm mainly concerned about the significant increase in vehicular traffic. Judge, that it is multifamily. So we should go back to the DRC, I believe, and look at it from the perspective of a multifamily development, which comes with different standards.
Councilmember Iredano Savage.
With parking.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things really quick. I've been thinking about this one a lot, and first and foremost, I always hate it when there is disruption in our neighborhoods. I think we thrive as a community, as family, and really trying to work together and welcoming our neighbors. And so, I think we've all given this really good thought, and I think one of the things I see here is obviously there does need to be some clarification when it comes to our processes and our codes. And I think we can always do better, whether it comes to explaining them at the beginning of the process, or maybe we need to relook at them at some point and maybe make some changes down the road, and I can certainly appreciate that. But at the same time, I really feel that the Skinners came to Tempe and found a property that they liked, and in good faith followed all of the rules and recommendations from the staff, and did everything what they believed was the right thing to do. And I believe our staff also supported their direction in the process at the time. And with that said, it's really hard for me to say to accept an appeal based on the fact of the neighbors regarding the process and the codes. And I think if it comes to process and the codes, then we definitely need to look at those and do a better job. And maybe it's interpretation. We talk a little bit about that too. But I will say this, I think the Skinners came here in very good faith. They want to be part of the neighborhood that is a really outstanding and unique neighborhood. And I can certainly do appreciate that. So tonight I would like to hopefully welcome the Skinners to Tempe in that neighborhood. And I will not be supporting the appeal tonight.
Anyone else like to make a comment? Anyone? Is there any other comments from the council or a motion regarding, now here, there's a couple different options we have. One option is to deny the appeal, which will uphold the DRC's decision to approve the use permit standard regarding the setback reduction and the second story. The second option is to approve the appeal to reverse the DRC's decision to approve the use permit and the use permit. The third option is to deny the appeal for the use permit standard setback and approve the appeal for the use permit for the second story. And there's also a fourth option, and there's regarding to deny the appeal for the use permit for the second story, approve the appeal for the use permit standard, or you can continue this for a future date and see if they're willing to see what they can do. Councilmember Adams.
I make a motion to reverse the DRC's decision.
You make a motion to
reverse the DRC's decision and approve the appeal.
You're making a motion to approve the appeal. I know it's snapping and I appreciate that, but if you continue to do so, I'm going to have to ask you guys to leave. Okay? Just so we can get through this and we can go to it. We can get through this and then you guys can have a chance, everyone can speak. But this is a business that we're dealing with. I'm sorry, this is what we have to get through and we'll get to all the comments for everyone to. So, Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I'm making a motion to approve the appeal.
There is a motion to approve the appeal.
Second, Mayor.
It's been seconded by Councilman Granville. So a yes vote, just for clarification, a yes vote, or approve it, because it's not the conflicting one.
Correct.
Vote would, oh, I'm sorry, Brigida. A yes vote would approve the appeal and effectively deny the project.
Okay? It is, but it is a little confusing.
Motion
Because we're
to
approving an appeal.
approve.
All right, so there's a motion to approve the appeal, which will deny the use permit and the second story addition. Yes, Councilmember Keating. We already had that. I already asked them that, and Karen gave her last statement because she's the appellant. She's the appellant for this process, so it can't be the Skinners, even though it's their project. They didn't apply for it.
So the appellant speaks twice and not
The process
It's
we
the
have to
process.
follow.
They can speak. Skinners, you can come forward and speak.
Councilman, Vice Mayor Kuby, you asked why we applied for single family. And the short answer for that is that when we showed the plans to the staff, that's what they recommended. So we're not trying to slip anything in past anybody. That's what we were told. That's the process that we followed.
You also had questions about, there's some misinformation about where the doors are and that kind of thing, the stairs. You can see the floor plan for the ground floor. The stairs to the north are down to the basement. The stairs on the south are up to the second floor. I don't understand how that could be multifamily when you have to enter into the house, the main house, to get to every other room. There's not a separate entrance into anything that would be a casita or a guest house or anything like that. The stairs are oriented to the main part of the house, which is part of the conditions of approval that we met, that the DRC decided on. So again, those that have been paid by the city, those that have been appointed by the city, have already approved of this. And if you grant this appeal, you're going against what those paid professionals have already decided to do. And not only that, we've been threatened by the main signer that they will oppose whatever we design. So we'll be back here again for this pleasant business. So we'd rather not do that. So please agree with the city staff and DRC and deny this appeal so we can build a single family home.
Thank you. All right, there's been a motion and there's been a second. We're going to call for the vote. Please vote.
Any day now, Mayor.
My motion passes 4-3. All right. The next item of the section is the non-consent agenda is ordinance and items for the introduction and first hearing. These items will be read and introduced tonight, but no vote will be taken. And women in the red. We're going to recess. We're going to go ahead and reconvene the city council meeting. Next item on our agenda is a non-consent agenda. I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. It's our non-consent agenda. Oh, first read. I'm sorry. Yeah, which is a non-consent agenda. Ordinance and items for introduction and first hearing. These items will be read and introduced tonight, but no vote will be taken. The second hearing and vote for these items 6B1 through 6B2 is scheduled for March 28, 2019. The second hearing and vote for item 6B4 is scheduled for April 25th, 2019. Ordinance and items for introduction and first hearing. Item 6B1 is to introduce and hold the first public hearing to adopt an ordinance authorizing the dedication of the city-owned land at various locations along the city of Tempe streetcar route for use as public right-of-way and authorizing the Deputy Public Works Director, Transportation, to execute a declaration memorializing such dedication and related documents. The second and final public hearing is scheduled for March 28, 2019. This is a first hearing. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us under item 6B1? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Any comments or discussion from the council on item 6B1? I did want to make an announcement for those that are wishing to come back in. We would like them to come back in. You do have to go through our security checkpoint, and there will be ample time after the meeting to speak at public comment. The next item under section 6 is 6B2 is to introduce and hold the first public hearing to adopt an ordinance authorizing the abandonment of a portion of 1 foot non-vehicular access easement recorded on Lot 1 and portion of Lot 12, the Hohokam Industrial Park subdivision located at the southwest corner of University Drive and 52nd Street. The second and final public hearing is scheduled for March 28, 2019. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone in the council wishing to discuss item 6B2? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, close that portion. Any comments or discussion from the council on item 6B2? The next item is item 6B3, is to introduce and hold the first public hearing to adopt an ordinance for a zoning map amendment from GID to MU4 and a planned area development overlay. A public hearing to adopt a resolution authorizing a general plan projected land use map amendment from commercial to mixed use and a general plan projected density map amendment from medium to high density and a development plan review for a new 4-story mixed-use development consisting of 395 dwelling units and 2 live-work units for the Camden Hayden 2 located at 600 East Curry Road. The applicant is Humanton Affiliates. The second and final public hearing is scheduled for March 28, 2019. This is a public hearing item. Would the applicant like to make a statement? Mr. Humanton? I think I'm hearing that we'd like to have a short statement.
Oh, I just have a question. There's one speaker.
No, you're an attorney.
Or Ms. Mayor.
Yes, Vice Mayor Kuby.
Or if you don't want to make the full presentation, I just have a question.
Happy to. It's your prerogative.
So to the will of the council, but I just wanted to, we had a conversation earlier in the week about the possibility of including some workforce and or affordable housing units within the mix of units in the.
We continue to study that. You asked me to speak with Paul. I spoke with Paul yesterday and again today. I know that you have some upcoming hearings on affordable housing and other related matters. We'll be prepared to address that again at the second hearing.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Humanton on item 6B3? I do have a card for public comment. Deborah Zajac. Deborah, can you please come forward?
Thank you. Deborah Zajac. I live at 1711 North McAllister. I have this printed in jumbo old lady print. Here, I want to begin by stating that I support a large residential project at this site. I think this is an ideal location. It is walking distance to Town Lake and future public amenities of Watermark. It's across the street from Papago Park, and it's close to public transportation with the Orbit route connecting to the transportation center and light rail. I think this project in its current form does not best serve our community, and there is the opportunity to make some positive changes. It is my opinion that this mayor and council can take a leadership role in demanding more from developers when they are pushing the boundaries of zoning and other changes to city standards in the name of increased profits. Using what was paid for a property is not an acceptable justification to build a proposed project. Maybe they paid too much, or they are just so confident that the city will go along and approve the project that meets their profit targets. I have 2 issues with the way this project was presented to our group. And I was not at the community meeting. This was the second presentation that Mr. Humanto came to our group. It's something he didn't have to do, so that was appreciated. First, it was presented as a residential project with 2 live-work units,
which at the time I did not understand the consequences regarding zoning. Second, our group was told there was more parking than required by the city due to the parking problems and they included these more parking spaces due to the parking problems experienced at the original Camden Haven. The fact is they are not requesting residential zoning. The 2 live-work units will allow for multi-use zoning and increased density versus what would be available if it were R5 residential like the original Camden Haven. I feel this is the only reason for the inclusion of 2 live-work units. The multi-use zoning will benefit the project with an additional 45+ units. I know we can't require it, but if they are asking for the city to push boundaries, why can't the city ask for something in return, like all or some of those units to be affordable housing? Please hold these developers to a higher standard to meet the needs of the community. I do appreciate that they will be building and maintaining a small dog park on the city property adjacent to the site. This will benefit their residents and the community. But if you think about it, this is a very good return on their investment for an additional 45+ units over the lifetime of this project. I could go into the misleading statement to our group regarding parking that confused me when I heard the conflicting presentation at the DRC meeting, but there isn't time to go into detail. The design of this project is just okay. It could be stunning, and this site deserves that. I noticed what is being built on McDowell and 68th in South Scottsdale, and those projects do not have a fortress-like appearance. I hope you consider some of the changes I am suggesting to make this project worthy of its location and our community.
Thank you. Next, we have Karen Gitlis.
Karen Gitlis, 1206 South Ash. I just wanted to, support the project. I know Charles can build a quality project, and I'm sure he will. And if he has some ideas for changes, I know he isn't hesitant to do that. And I consider Charles a bar buddy. I hope he considers me such. So we go back a ways. And I would just like to reiterate what I'm hearing here. I didn't know that it would be a point that is currently under consideration, but that we include as much workforce housing in the project as possible, that you guys, you leverage his wanting for higher density to workforce housing. Thank you for considering this project.
Mr. Humantel.
First, let me say for the record, neither Karen nor I were in a bar when this happened. We have a second hearing on this. Many of the concerns that were raised were addressed at the Planning Commission, but I'll raise them again or discuss them again at the second hearing. I think there's a misnomer about parking. This is a PAD process, and we have provided more parking than the adjacent projects, not more parking necessarily than is required. We went through a parking study, but I'll discuss that in more detail and with some exhibits that will help explain that, and I'll address the other issues as well, unless you have other questions you'd like me to address tonight.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is item 6B4, to introduce and hold the first public hearing to receive public comment on a resolution authorizing the annual Community Development Block Grant and Home Program Funds Plan for fiscal year 1920. The second and final public hearing is scheduled for April 25th, 2019. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us under item 6B4? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none, we'll close that portion. Any comments from the council? Seeing none. Next item is the ordinance and items for second hearing and final adoption. The first item under this section is 16.1 is to hold a second and final public hearing to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Tempe City Code relating to the administration and the city code generally, dissolving the Public Works Department, establishing an Engineering and Transportation Department, and the Municipal Utilities Department, removing the Parks Maintenance section from the Field Operations Division to the Community Services Department to be combined with Recreation to form a new Community Services Division called the Parks and Recreation Division. This ordinance amends the city code generally to reflect that the Public Works Department will be known as either the Engineering and Transportation Department or the Municipal Utilities Department, and the Public Works Director will be known as either the Engineering and Transportation Director or the Municipal Utilities Director. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on this issue? You can get my attention. Seeing none. Close that portion of the hearing. Is there any comments or discussion from the council? Is there a motion on item 6C1? It's moved by Councilmember Keating and seconded by Councilmember Adams. Please vote. That motion passes 7-0. Okay. Next is item 6C2. This item does require 2 votes, one to adopt an ordinance and one to pass the emergency provision. Item 6C2 is to introduce and hold a first public hearing and adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 19, Article 4 of the Tempe City Code, Motor Vehicles and Traffic Operation of Vehicles by amending Section 19-55 relating to the unlawful use of the mobile electronic device and declaring the existence of an emergency. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us under item 6C2? I do not have any cards. Yes, please come forward. State your name and place of residence for the record. Oh, can I? Don Hawker, come on down.
My name is Don Hawker, and my city of residence is Tempe. Since concern for human life is the purported motivation behind this proposal to eliminate hand use of cell phones in cars, we need to review possible ulterior motivations in the context of the City of Tempe's general regard for life, and also its very consistent pattern of Agenda 21 slavish hostility toward private vehicle driving, the city's addiction to increasing revenues, and desire to micromanage the behavior of us ignorant masses. Chopping off auto lanes to serve non-existent bicycle travelers, public bicycles and now scooters littering sidewalks, and the design of new residents to feed the light rail and useless streetcar demonstrate the contempt for and discouragement of private transportation of the city commensurate with this proposal. Most of us will be denied GPS and phone calling. Since radio use could also be distractive will the next ordinance prevent touching radio controls. It is stated that nationwide 3,450 deaths are from distracted driving, which you don't specify if that's all cell phones. In that same period nationwide, about 1 million babies were aborted, 12,533 in Arizona, over 2,000 right here at the Auschwitz for Tots called Planned Parenthood on Baseline. Deaths which are fully supported by the city, especially by the city attorney's office and the police force, who work tirelessly to protect those statistics in their persecution of Christians who attempt to expose and mitigate the genocide. While in the past these numbers were discounted as the fetus was proposed as less than or other than human, recent events such as legislation attempted right here in Arizona to allow the killing of abortion survivors highlights that the humanity of the baby or the health of the mother was never the real issues, as those are not factors for a born baby. In short, the city doesn't need to become more intrusive than to hold drivers to their already legal responsibility to control their vehicles and not cause accidents, and give up the facade of concern for human life and limb, which is obviously not the true intention of this city's leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us on this item? I will close that portion of the public meeting. Any comments or discussion from the council on this? Councilmember Keating?
Thank you, Mayor. As part of Tempe's commitment to Vision Zero, and in the recent, death of a bicyclist due to a texting driver, and the long history the city has with pedestrian accidents, I think this is a very appropriate and needed ordinance that we're considering tonight. Councilmember Granville sent me a text last meeting with statistics about just how dangerous texting and driving can be. And I know that no one up here has done it, as I stated last meeting, but you could totally see how, moving at a high rate of speed, looking down at your phone for only a second could be the difference between life and death. So if there is a way to make our roads safer for not only motorists, but pedestrians and cyclists, then I say, more power to it. I will be supporting this ordinance tonight, and I think it's a great step forward as far as public safety goes in the city. Thank you.
Councilman Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to somewhat reiterate some of what Council Member Keating had to say. I mean, obviously, this is a public safety concern, and obviously, this is our chance to do one even better. Right now, we already have our texting ordinance established, but this just takes it up a notch. And it is about safety. It is about not just your safety, but your loved ones, others, and people around you. So very appropriate. I know that there is a groundswell statewide, nationally. This will be a common deal when we drive across the country. So I will be supporting it.
Councilmember Adams.
The facts are that texting causes accidents, including deaths. Anything that we can do as public servants to prevent deaths is something that I'm going to support, and I will be supporting this amendment this evening.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Kuby.
So we don't name our bills and our laws, I realize. But if I could name this bill, I would name it after Kayla Gonzalez, who is a young ASU student about to start school on August 15th. The first day of school is the 16th, her freshman year, and she was hit by a distracted driver, purportedly, shattered pelvis, multiple broken bones in her legs, and an amputated, part of her foot was amputated in the accident. And I was a witness to the aftermath of it. I'm haunted by it to this day. And if we can prevent any more deaths or serious injuries from these crashes, that we'll have done a good job as a council. And I want to thank very much Julian Dressang and Shelley Seiler for bringing this forward, and Tempe PD that was wholly supportive of their intention to really walk the talk in our Vision Zero goal. So I will be supporting this amendment to our ordinance tonight. Thank you.
I want to make a comment. I agree with everything that's been said. I know there is an emergency clause in this, and I think it'd be important if the council would commit to a 30-day educational period, because I think this is all about education of residents. Would the council be amenable to having an education period? I mean, I guess we could do it either 30, 60, or 90 days, but I think I think if we can direct our city manager, if we move forward with something, that could happen. Andrew?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. I would direct the appropriate staff to make sure that the first 30 days upon passage would be education and context only.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the period of time?
30.
Mr. Mayor.
From passage, which, depending on whether the emergency clause
If
passes, would be today or
Vice Mayor?
That's a great idea, Mr. Mayor, because I was concerned about that. So there'd be official warnings given and no citations in that first 30-day period. That's what that translates into.
That's correct, Vice Mayor. At council's direction, I would work with appropriate staff, the police department, and make sure that the enforcement was warnings for the first 30 days to do public education.
Okay. All right. So now we look to, is there a motion to adopt the ordinance only with the education portion 30 days after?
That's standard.
Okay, so this has been moved by Councilmember Granville. Seconded? Yes, Councilmember Keating.
So it's not the emergency clause? It's not with the, it is?
We're just going to issue warnings.
Okay, I thought when he said ordinance only, okay, as long as the emergency clause is part of it. Yeah, got it. I'm good.
That would be correct, but the emergency clause takes a second vote after you approve
Yeah,
the ordinance.
we have a whole nother vote.
Okay.
I did say that at the beginning. Councilmember Adams.
So are we going to be working with the schools also when we're doing the education to let them know?
Thank you, Councilmember Adams, rest of council. Yes, we can do that as well. I'll be happy to reach out to the school districts as appropriate to make sure they understand what the impact of this new ordinance is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there's been a motion to adopt an ordinance with a 30-day education period. Please vote.
And there was a second. I didn't hear who seconded.
It was seconded by Councilmember Keating.
Thank you.
That motion passes 7-0. Next, we do have a emergency clause. So because is there a motion to adopt the emergency provision? It's been moved by Councilmember Adams. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Navarro. Please vote.
Mayor, would you like to read that emergency provision into the record?
The emergency provision states as follows: because of potential fatalities caused by distracted driving, the immediate operation of the provisions of this ordinance is necessary for the preservation of the public peace, health, safety, and general welfare of the community, and an emergency is hereby declared to exist, and this ordinance shall be full force and effect from and after its adoption by the City Council of the City of Tempe. It's been moved by Councilmember Adams, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. Please vote. That motion passes 7-0. The next item on the agenda is our public appearances. According to the Open Arizona Meeting Law, the City Council may only discuss matters listed on this agenda. Matters discussed by the public during public appearances cannot be discussed by the City Council unless they are specifically listed on this agenda. There's a 3-minute time limit per speaker. Speakers' visual aids and recorded tapes are not allowed. Members of the public shall refrain from making any personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or becoming boisterous while addressing the City Council or while attending the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, clamping, stomping of feet, yelling, or any other similar demonstrations are also prohibited. Violations of these rules may result in the removal of the City Council meeting. Under scheduled public appearances, we do have 4 speakers. The first one is Mr. Kim Baker. Please come forward, state your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Kim Baker. I live in Avondale, Arizona. Thank you all for allowing me to address the council, mayor, council members. 69 days, too long. My son was arrested February of 2018, charged with some serious charges by the Tempe Police Department. And I'm sure you all are aware, his charges have been dismissed. How many of you would be willing to give up 69 days of your life in the county jail for something that you did not do? And you notified the police the night in question, giving information that could have cleared my son that night. Overlooked, arrested, and he's in jail for 69 days. I want you to think about that. Would you give up 69 days? Because if you would, either one of you, it would settle my grievance. But you know you're innocent, so you will not give that time up. My son can never get that time back. And I want you all to know he contemplated suicide while he was in the county jail. I happened to get the information and called the jail and had a sergeant to pull him out and have a long talk with him. Stephen wouldn't even shoot a BB gun when he was growing up as a child. I knew he had nothing to do with this robbery. I would like to lay the challenge. Would you give up 69 days of your life, Mayor? That's my petition tonight. And I hope someone could answer that, because I'll be back for an answer. You guys have no idea what it feels like to be an African-American young man. He's only 33 years old. To walk from his apartment to a QT, and he's stopped, and someone says, yes, he's the one. We need reform to start tonight. Whereas I know the officers have a hard job to do policing communities around the world. I hope and pray that there are some resources that can be made available for my son's mental regaining of confidence. He still resides in Tempe, but he's very bitter. Very bitter. I'm not mad at you guys. I am disappointed, though. I paid $5 for a police report a week ago, maybe longer, only to be told that it's not ready.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. Think about that 69 days.
Next, we have Ms. Joanne Scott Woods.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. I'm speaking on the unlawful arrest and imprisonment of Stephen Baker, Kim Baker's son, regarding 4 issues. 1, racial profiling. Officers were looking for a black suspect. After immediately arresting 2 suspects, for an hour later and after driving about 3 miles away, they arrested a black man walking on the sidewalk in his house slippers. Number 2, no probable cause. The officers did not check out his 2 verifiable alibis, the surveillance video that shows him at the QT during the robbery, and the technology within his cell phone that places him there also. Number 3, unfair burden of cash bond on impoverished people. The Arizona Task Force on Fair Justice for All calls this unconstitutional and recommends the expanded use of the Arnold's Foundation risk assessment tool to determine pretrial release decisions to reduce unnecessary and unjust pretrial detention. Number 4, psychological effects. Psychological disorders and stigmatization, including suspicion from others, social isolation, and losing one's job, which happened to Mr. Baker's son. Exonerees have been compared to trauma victims, and wrongful imprisonment also meets the definition of torture, leaving prison with the same symptoms as torture. Thank you all for your public service in establishing policy that respects and restores dignity for all.
Thank you. Next scheduled speaker is Jim Pinkerman. Right here. Next is Edwin Lambert.
My name is Edwin Lambert. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm here to again ask you to assist me in collecting money from a HUD landlord, Timothy Wright, because the judge ordered him to reimburse me money for replacing carpeting. I was here on the 25th of May in 2017. I made the same request. You asked me to be patient, that you would get back with me. After 7.5 months, I figured that I've been patient long enough. I called Elizabeth Higgins. 3 weeks later, she gave me the same information that I'd been given before by the finance department and the housing department, and that was that the city attorney says they're not going to get involved, that I should get my own attorney. I'm not sure, but I got this suspicion that if I get my own attorney, it's to make action against the city, to make the city get involved, but I'm not sure if that's what she meant. I'd like to give you some information about me, just so you'll know that I'm not going away. This was because one of the foster babies that we were caring for had brain surgery. We adopted him. He's been disabled since birth. He, in desperation, him and his family moved into a Timothy Wright house, and they needed me to sign and come up with money, which makes me a party to this case. Some of the information I wanted to give you is that when I turned 18, I joined the Navy. I was assigned to the Seabees at my request and was made a utility-man, which very few people do it. The Navy saw that I was potential for doing the right thing, and that's where they put me. After about 18 months, the Navy asked for volunteers for people to go to the Antarctic for a year. They had over 3,000 volunteers. I was one of 132 that the Navy selected for this assignment. After I got back from the Antarctic, I went to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where I was helping other Seabees build dependent housing. My enlistment was about up. I made the Navy an offer. I said if they got me orders to a school at an Army base at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, right out of Washington, I would re-enlist. They had very few Navy personnel that were eligible for this school. That year, the Navy took 10 of us out of the whole Navy. I went to school for 1 year at the Army base right out of Washington. At the end of a year of school, then I started being trained for the facility. After about 11 months, I was issued this certificate, which authorized me to operate the first nuclear power plant in the United States, which is a picture here. I was then, at 24 years of age, a high school graduate, and I was operating a nuclear power plant all by myself as far as the control went, 15 miles from from where Mr. Eisenhower, or President Eisenhower, was living. After I left the Navy, I went to work in Chicago. I was licensed to operate high-pressure boilers. I then...
Mr. Lambert, your time is up.
Okay, well, I can talk. Okay,
But if we could meet for a beer later, I would love to hear the rest of these stories.
Okay, well, what I'm saying
Thank you, Mr.
is-
Lambert.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, now can we discuss things?
No, you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is unscheduled public appearances. I do have a whole bunch of cards I'm going to read through. If I call your name, please come on down and you can speak. And regarding unscheduled public appearances, because it's unscheduled, we are not able to address you under unscheduled public appearances. The first name I have is Michael Beaver.
Thank you, Council. I had planned to come tonight to observe, and I have 3 points that I'd like to make. It won't take near the 3 minutes. And Michael Beaver from Mesa, so I'm not from Tempe. But first, I'm here to show support for the family and friends of Antonio. My condolences go to him. I'm heartbroken, and I know you expressed a similar thing, and I appreciate that. I think they're gone, so they're not here to hear that. 2, I'm here to express my outrage at the very premise that any form or fashion, it's okay for our police officers to shoot a 14-year-old in the back, running away from something as serious but petty as it was. As a concealed carry person, that would be totally unacceptable. Defending your house or family, to shoot somebody when they're no longer a danger. I'm outraged. And I'm here to ask for accountability for our police. Due diligence is appropriate, I get that. How long does that take? How long did Antonio have for due diligence to be served to him? He got away how many feet? 14 years old. I don't care what he did, short of just shooting somebody. I don't care. That's wrong. And it's this body that should bring that accountability. And putting somebody on paid vacation until you take your time to dismiss the case is outrageous. The citizens are getting tired, and it's around the nation, of our police force behaving this way. We are on the same side. Our soldiers deployed, serving, have more higher standards of rules of engagement for enemies than we do here. That's unacceptable. Protect and serve. That's really what it should be about, not shoot in the back and ask questions later and dismiss. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Next, we have Maria Castro. Next, we have Peter O'Malley. We have, next is Darren Barrett. Next, we have Milagros Renteria. Next, we have Brian Pelzek. Next, we have Sarah. Next, we have Tatiana Hassan. Next, we have Terry Nickel. Next, we have Jewel Valenzuela. Next, we have Alexia Isas. Next, we have Adrienne Zavala. Next, we have Camelpred Carasorita. We have Christina Green. We have Victoria Perez Carranza. Logan Miller. Tanya Lopez. Stephen Levin. Madison West. Jim Peakerman. Karen Wood. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Yes, Karen Wood. I live in Gilbert, Arizona. I also came here today to observe, and as an ex-police officer, I was very interested in the case that happened here in Tempe. It's always heartbreaking when there's a loss of life, but it's also heartbreaking not just for the person who's passed on in their family, but also for the person who had to take that life. I'm an Army veteran, and like I said, I'm an ex-police officer. So I've been around for a good part of my life, people who have had to take a life, or people who have experienced someone that they love dying near them. So my heartfelt sympathies to the family, truly. However, I know there are situations when you are out in the field and you have to make a determination immediately. You don't have 5 minutes, what should I do? You need to make an immediate decision on what you have to do. And if there's any threat of a weapon, that they're garnishing a weapon and there is any possibility that there's going to be threat of death to anyone in the public or yourself, that sometimes you need to use lethal force. And it's unfortunate. It shouldn't have to be that way in a civilized society. Unfortunately, it is. It's just a fact. So my urging to you is to not be affected by mob rule, like what we experienced in this room earlier, screaming and disregard for law, disregard for propriety, for respect for this office. Disregard that, please. Look at the facts of the case. Let the police do their internal investigation, unimpeded by mob rule, and screaming obscenities and holding signs. I know that they're having a knee-jerk reaction about a lot of this. Some of them are having a knee-jerk reaction. Some of them I have seen in other protests when I've been in other offices in the state. And what they do is they've tried to dismantle the police force on every level that they can. The last hearing I was at was down in Phoenix at the town council meeting there. And the same group of people were there trying to, number one, make it where police officers in the state of Arizona cannot use any chemical deterrence. And then they also want to deny any kind of security for our president, any president, when they come to Phoenix. So the chief police of Phoenix actually had to come into the hearing room and talk about why they use deterrence. They scream that they hate the police, they scream that they hate our state, they scream they hate America, they hate the system. These are the people who want to dictate what this police officer has to go through. So please keep in mind when you make your decisions that he has a family as well, that it's not always easy to make these decisions out on the street, and to let the internal investigation proceed as it normally would, and not be distracted by all of the mob mentality. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Fallon. Next is Nate. Nate B. Next, Babs. Next is Nico. Next is Alana Billingsley. Next is Joshua Clove. Joshua Close. Next is Angela Lee. Next is Camden Palat. Next is Nate H. Ben Cooper. Jack Morris. Norel Rosen. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Noel Rosen. I live in Wickenburg. I'm here to speak in support of Tempe Police and Officer Hine. He did his job. He did what he was trained to do, and he actually dealt with what he perceived as a credible threat. He pulls up in front of a pickup truck or a truck that's being robbed. It's being burglarized. And you've got a suspect inside who he sees, from the officer's standpoint, has a weapon. So this suspect knew that this was a police officer. It was clearly identified, okay? And this suspect decides to run, and he's carrying what looks to be a 1911 .45 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He chose to run. The cop didn't tell him to run. The cop didn't tell him to burglarize the vehicle. This young, innocent kid that they're trying to portray, he made a choice. And it's a choice that got him killed. He's responsible for that. And I think it's ridiculous that this mob be allowed to take over a city council meeting and demand justice when they don't know all the facts. I understand, Chief Moyer, that they're still looking into this, okay? But I want you to know, there are people that support your officers. Every officer that is in this room right now that can hear me, know that I fly this flag with a lot of pride. It's the Thin Blue Line flag. And I do it because I care about our cops. They've got a tough job. They have a right to go home to their families. Now, it's unfortunate that this kid was killed, but he was killed because of his irresponsibility. He made the choice. I don't know if there was the parents were involved in his life. I don't know this, the whole statistics, the situation at home. but your officer did nothing wrong. There's a lot of people that support your cops, that support law enforcement nationwide. We need to start standing for our cops. And Mr. Mayor, I noticed that in the last time they took over the city council meeting, they weren't cleared. Have the courage to stand up for law and order and clear the room when these people get disorderly. That's not too hard. But nonetheless, no, Chief Moyer, to all the members of the Tempe Police Department, you do have support. And I'm proud to give that support. Stay safe out there. Thank you.
Next, Jason Gonzalez. Frankie Clock. Nissa Hampton. And Miss Arona. I think we have some more cards. Liam Huggins, please come forward. State your name and place of residence for the record.
My name is Liam Huggins, and I'm a Tempe native. I'd like to talk about a couple of things, why so many of those names that were called are not here. I'd like to respond to the portrayal of Antonio Arce, and I'd like to accurately portray what I feel a lot of people within my field who are protesting actually want. So firstly, I'd like to say that it is very unfortunate that a lot of the people who I know had great things to say, who wanted to be out here, who wanted to say things, cannot be here because unfortunately, in the midst of our protest, by simply observing the police, by protesting verbally the police, for what I believe 3 people got arrested. Many people were physically assaulted by the police for being too close, including myself. And so many are over at the police station right now, making sure that their friends, that their brothers and sisters who were arrested are okay. And so I will try my best to speak for them. Nextly, I'd like to respond to how people who previously have spoken seem so willing to demonize and misconstrue the fact of the matter. I've looked over the body cam footage, and there's no clear evidence that Antonio Arce was clearly aware that there was a police officer who was coming up to him. The police officer did not state that he was a police officer or his name, simply told him to stop. And the supposed 1911 handgun object was a simple black cell phone, everything that, an object that everyone carries around with them, which was mistaken for a handgun. It was a very clear mistake on the part of the police officer, and the police officer was in no immediate danger. The subject was running away in the opposite direction, not facing the police officer in any sort of way during the entirety of the body cam footage. And lastly, I'd like to say that many here protesting are not anti-police. They do not believe that we need to abolish the police, that we need to get rid of them or arrest them for whatever reason. Many believe that the police force needs to be reformed. It needs to be reformed and so that there is not going to be accidents such as this. There needs to be further training. There needs to be more options that are non-lethal, that can lead to conflict resolution without the death of one of my peers, one of the youth. I've lived in Tempe all my life. I was a former member of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Commission, and I hope that my words can hopefully stir some change within the council members here. And thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Jason Knorr. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Jason Knorr, I'm from Tempe. It's my time start. Okay. I'm here to talk about 2 things, violence and silence. Tempe PD has been implicated, obviously, in violence tonight and with the murder of Antonio Arce. I don't think I need to reiterate what the previous speaker said, but it was clear that this was a child. It was clear that he did not have a weapon. And it was clear that the police officer completely failed in his duty to protect and serve. The police officer did not follow protocol, and that's what resulted in the death of a 14-year-old child. That's what you guys should be thinking about here. That's what should be weighing on your minds. And I can tell while we're shouting through the windows that you guys are definitely concerned about this, but that's the other thing I want to talk about, is the silence that's coming from the Tempe City Council. Like, the people want to hear justice from this. We want to know what's going on with this investigation. We need to know where you guys stand on this police officer, where you guys stand on police violence in general. And so it's important, especially to the people outside, especially the people whose names you've been calling all night who left after the Tempe City Council left the room. It's important that we understand what your positions are. It's important that you speak on this matter. Tonight, after leaving this room, there was a protest down Mill Avenue, which resulted in the assault and arrest of 3 protesters. I was there. I saw them. I have video recording of these arrests on my phone, which I would invite any of you to come find me and watch it. I'm sure that there will be plenty of evidence, plenty of recordings for you guys to watch in the coming days. But just make sure that you understand what's going on. I saw someone wrestled to the ground by Tempe PD tonight. So what is really needed to be understood here is that this is systematic violence, that yes, one police officer shot a child and that's terrible, but we have to look towards the other police in the room. We have to look towards the other police in the force who are defending this police officer. There's no reason for them to do it. He was clearly in complete disregard of protocol. And so we have to understand that there is a cultural problem inside Tempe PD. There's a cultural problem inside Phoenix and the entire state of Arizona. Phoenix is leading currently in the number of victims shot by police. So currently we need to look at systematic violence from the police force, and we need to hear what you have to say on it. Please stop being silent.
Thank you. At the beginning of the public comment, I did state that because it's unscheduled public appearances, we cannot mention anything. And also at the beginning of this council meeting, there was an update from our city manager with a statement, as well as I made a statement. And that statement will be available online at www.tempe.gov. Our next speaker is Raquel Gutierrez. Raquel?
Good evening. I'm Raquel Gutierrez, and I'm a lifelong Tempe resident. I went to Tempe High School. I went to Gilliland High School, where Antonio went to. And I also went to ASU. I was taught by people who are parents of folks in this room. I was the first delegation to Lower Hutt, New Zealand. And the young men before me spoke very eloquently about, I think, why I'm here tonight. I know that this council cannot respond to me tonight, and I know that this council cares about the Arce family and are also troubled about what happened. That's evident by most of you, not all of you, but by most of you. And we also know that you can't do anything about the police chief. You can't do anything about that. What we do know is that we can continue to talk to the city council so that the city council can also talk to the people that they are over, which is the city manager. And the city manager, I'm sure that the folks who are here tonight, who I'm very proud of because they were exercising democracy in a way that is a continuum of democracy from that very, like we're doing right now, all the way to what they did tonight and what they did the last time and what they will continue to do if people do not start addressing this. So I am really, I'm really sad that this happened for the family, and I'm really sad that this happened for my city that I love. that has so many beautiful things about it. And I really wish that we could see this more as not about council and a family, but we could see this about a neighbor to a neighbor, and about people who have children to people who have children, and reach out in that way. And we have systems in place that disconnect us from being able to do that. We have protocol and rules that don't allow us to really do that in this role. You are able to do that, not in your role, when you're out of this chamber and you're not sitting in that role. And I hope that you take the time to do that with the family and collectively do it with the family, because it would be too traumatic for them, as it is already, for them to have that conversation with each and every one of you. This needs to be an organized, collective conversation where you guys can connect as human beings, and then you can come back and we can bring people together and look at policies and practices that are in this city, but also pervasive within the whole county around police abuse. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Selena. Help me out. Is it Talita?
Cheetah. Like a cat.
Cheetah. It looks like a T.
It is TCHID. Do I hit talk? No? All right.
Please state your name and place of
Selena
residence.
Cheetah. I live in Tempe. Have my entire life. I'm also here to speak about Antonio Arce. I was not going to speak tonight. I should not be speaking tonight. You write a long list of people who should be speaking tonight, and unfortunately, they're no longer here. Some of them have been arrested. I'm sure you guys will hear more about that when you guys leave this room. As we heard earlier during the scheduled public appearances, this isn't the only issue brought even tonight regarding Tempe PD and the need for reform. I understand that there are plenty of things that City Council cannot do, but you're up here passing ordinances about mobile device usage while driving and speaking so gravely and deeply about public safety, and it just feels hard to listen to that. It's hard to listen to that. We're talking about texting and driving, and yes, tragic accidents happen, but this wasn't an accident. And the repeated troubles that we have with Tempe PD are not accidents. They are systemic. So you guys are making decisions about public safety up here, so we're seeing a little bit about what you can do, and I don't know how that translates to police. I want to thank you for naming your condolences. It means a lot, but I cannot believe that you guys can't do more. I just can't. I can't believe that that's it. I would like to urge you to think about what your role is in this. What is your role in holding our Tempe PD accountable? What is your role in reforming Tempe PD? What is your role in urging Mr. Chang to do what he can do? And I urge you to do what you can do. A lot of people are addressing City Council up here, but it's not you, is it? But each one of us has a role, right? We're here, we stand up here and we talk for 3 minutes. That's my role, right? I post on Facebook. But you guys are in positions of power, each one of you. So please, I urge you to think about what is your role in holding yourself and holding Tempe PD accountable to our citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Justin Stewart.
My name is Justin Stewart. I live at 814 West Howe Street in Tempe. Austin Del Castillo, Dalvin Hollins, Antonio Arce. Tempe can do better. Tempe should do better. Tempe, please do better.
Next is Randy Perez. Please state your name and place of residence for the record.
Randy Perez, I live in Tempe, I have for 5 years. I didn't plan on coming to speak tonight, and I'm not here for any political reason or anything like that, but I'm here to talk about leadership, I think, is what I would like to talk about for my 3 minutes that I have with you all. I'm so disappointed and frustrated at the lack of respect given to the folks here tonight. I know many of you individually, I have good relationships with you, I think, and I understand that you're here for the right reasons and you want to serve the community. But I want to talk about the visual almost and the feeling that we get when we're in the back, right, and folks start to get excited, right? They care about this issue. They care about the fact there's a 14-year-old kid who's dead. My brother's 13. I can't imagine my mom and I, if that were to happen. And you walk that way, but we're over here, right? Why don't you walk this way? Why don't you try to have that conversation with us, right? I know that it's loud and it's disruptive, and I know that there's rules that you're trying to get across to all of us, and I know that you want to keep the order, and there's other pieces of the puzzle besides this one issue, but there's more to us over here, and we are just as important as any of the other ordinances going on. I know that there's more city business. You have city staff here that are doing incredible work trying to get all these pieces of the puzzle put together. But this is what matters right now. This is the test of your leadership. This is the test of the values that we elect you to have a progressive city council in our community. Police violence is very difficult, right? You can't understand the way that I feel being surrounded by police right now. I feel scared sometimes when I have that happen to me. I've had negative interactions with police, right? And I'm a Latino that can present white. I can't imagine what it's like for Antonio when he was 14 and he had his back turned. Right, these are really difficult issues that we have to deal with, and I'm just wondering, is there a special session that can be called by the council? Is there more that can be done? I'm sure that you're having meetings. I know that you're having these conversations, right? But what does it look like to these folks? And then to another point that was made earlier, just because someone's not from here and they're here tonight doesn't mean their voice is any less important, and it shouldn't be less important to this council. Tempe likes to play itself as a regional leader on so many different issues, economic growth, ASU, but when it comes to the bad stuff, right, folks can't come in and have a say about it. I think that that's a little silly. I guess, again, I'm going to come back to the idea that this council desperately needs a common thread and a common unity and leadership that's going to bring us all together, because we can't have more kids getting shot. We can't have folks coming to this council and not being heard. And I would just encourage you all to do better. And it's not, I know you personally, it's not a personal indictment on any of you. I don't want you to take it that way. I want you to take it as, I'm a community member. I love Tempe. Tempe changed my whole life. Tempe gave me everything. I was not the person standing before you when I got here, and I'm so grateful for this community. But I would just encourage you all to think about that and do better. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the cards I have. Is there anyone else in the audience wishing to address us under unscheduled public appearances? Seeing none, we are adjourned.